What makes a novel a thriller? What differentiates it from mystery or suspense? I discuss these questions and more with fellow YouTuber Alexa Donne, who's a thriller connoisseur and author. We co-wrote this video of 6 tips for writing better thriller novels, from designing killer endings and plot twists, to exploring the darker side of humanity through complex characters and themes. As a genre, thrillers are a broad category, and the definition has changed over time. In the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, the first authors to come to mind with thrillers were usually Tom Clancy and Dan Brown, along with Stieg Larsson's runaway bestseller The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. A decade later, authors like Gillian Flynn and Paula Hawkins ignited a key subgenre of thrillers: domestic suspense and psychological suspense. There are medical thrillers, legal thrillers, political thrillers, spy thrillers, gothic thrillers, techno thrillers, and a dozen other subgenres. Mystery, suspense, and thriller are all overlapping genres, so it's not always easy to draw a clear line between them. As the dictionary definitions state, mysteries deal with the solution of a mysterious crime, with crime novels being a mystery subgenre. The primary purpose of suspense novels is to produce a feeling of frightened anticipation, and thrillers are designed to hold the interest by the use of a high degree of intrigue, adventure, or suspense. When readers grab a thriller novel off the shelf, they're hunting for a fast-paced, high-stakes, edge-of-their-seats page-turner, trying to get ahead of the narrative and guess what will happen next as part of the fun. But some books shelved as thrillers are more atmospheric and have a slow burn. Ruth Ware's novels slowly build suspense before the characters spiral downward. There are different ways to pace a thriller, and not all thrillers feature a murder or a detective. It's a vibrant category filled with entertaining stories that have real teeth and depth. With that in mind, here are 6 ways to approach writing thriller novels that move readers through a roller coaster of emotions.
Hello everyone, Alexa Donne here. I'm the author of The Ivies, a YA boarding school thriller, among other novels. My upcoming thriller, Pretty Dead Queens, is all about small-town secrets and murder. When writing a thriller, my first tip is to start at the end. Every thriller involves a narrative question. Who murdered the main character's best friend? Why are women disappearing from this same small town? To make the writing process easier for yourself, you need to know the who, the why, or the what. Who committed the crime, why they did it, their motive, or what exactly is the truth. You can work backward from one of those answers to craft the plot and characters. More than any other genre in a thriller, you need to know where you're going, because the final plot twist is the entire point. That twist can come from the answer to one of those questions. If the killer is obvious, make the motive unusual. If the motive is obvious, make the killer unusual. Riley Sager's novel, The Last Time I Lied, is filled with twist after twist, with readers constantly facing red herrings about the killer and their potential motives. I once wrote a novel where I knew the motive, but not who did it. I started with that motive as the final twist and built the story and the characters around that reveal. Other times, I start with the final set piece and build off of that. For The Ivies, I knew there would be a party at a rich person's house as the protagonist figures out the killer, so I was working toward that ending. That was my cookie. I wanted to write that scene, and knowing it ahead of time gave me something to look forward to. As you write, ask yourself, what's really going on here? Think about the plot behind the plot. That makes it easier to write your surface plot. Whether you outline or not, having that baseline knowledge allows you to insert hints and foreshadowing as you're drafting. I often discover new reveals as I'm writing, thanks to having certain pieces already in place. You can outline everything ahead of time if you want, but no matter your process, give yourself the freedom to come up with a crazy twist or red herring and incorporate it while drafting. I've come up with some of the best plot twists during my early drafts. Thriller readers expect a twist ending. In fact, it's such an expectation that a lot of books now have a double twist. When I was reading Holly Jackson's A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, I had the clues all lined up, and I thought that one person definitely was the murderer. I was right about one thing, but at the very end, there was another reveal. As a writer, you can lead your audience toward one conclusion at the 80% mark as a form of misdirection, and then between the 80 and 90% mark, you hit them with the second twist. Alice Feeney is a master of subverting expectations in her books Sometimes I Lie, His and Hers, and Rock, Paper, Scissors. In her ending, she creates this final knife twist where a single piece of information colors the entire narrative that came before, usually in a darker way. It's not about changing the culprit or what happened, but about showing the characters in a new light. This makes a reread of the book a whole new experience for an excited reader. Twists are about subverting expectations, but don't throw logic out the window or twist your plot into a pretzel trying to shock people. You'll risk watering down your story's believability. Even if some readers guess your twist, if you entertain them enough along the way and make how you get there exciting, they won't care. The goal is never to write the most outrageous thing that no one could ever guess. The goal is to fool some people, but entertain everyone, no matter what they guess.
That leads us into tip number 2. Don't be afraid of tropes. Thriller readers enjoy tropes and archetypes, so as a writer you want to twist the expected in fun ways. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Look at any thriller novel and you can usually pinpoint the trope right away. Kara Thomas's books are a good example. The Darkest Corners is the main character returns to their small town trope. Little Monsters centers on toxic friends / mean girls. The Cheerleaders is the it happened that night trope, where everything harkens back to a big incident from years ago. Other tropes include domestic suspense, the can you trust your husband trope, small town secrets, serial killers, unreliable narrators, and government conspiracies. Go with the tropes you love, what you love reading, that itch you can't scratch. It's the one you can't get enough of, or one you crave but not enough people have written it. It's the trope you want to play with, the trope that will challenge you. The trope that gives you a plot, characters, or really cool twist you can build a whole book around. I love the isolation trope, where characters are trapped on an island or in a house during a snowstorm. Agatha Christie was especially fond of this trope. It's fun to read, but it's also challenging to write, because you have to murder people creatively. Tropes are frameworks, not formulas. They can help you lay out the structure of your story in the best possible way, because tropes lend themselves to specific plot beats. They provide a roadmap for writing any type of thriller. Let's deconstruct the isolation trope as an example. Here are the beats. Corral your cast of characters into an isolated location. Trap them there, perhaps through inclement weather. No one knows anything is wrong until someone dies. It should always seem like an accident. Then comes the oh shit moment when a second person dies, and a third. Someone is hunting them. The characters point fingers at each other and search the location to see if anyone else is there. But there's only the group of them, so they know one of them did it. They turn on each other as more people die or disappear. They try to find out who brought them there and why. When 3 or 4 of the final cast are left, tensions peak and everything barrels downhill to the whodunit moment, and the culprit tries to escape. All of these plot points might sound overly familiar, but the fun is in developing the characters, including the reasons they're on this deserted island or wherever, and what they'll do to escape. Being trapped in a fancy mansion is different from hiding out in a forest during a snowstorm. It'll bring out varying reactions from your characters. The isolation trope has built-in conflict that comes from that story setup. When picking your thriller trope, go with one that automatically injects tension into your story.
Building tension also comes from the main character having personal stakes in the outcome of the mystery. And that's where tip number 3 comes in. Choose a point of view character who's driven to investigate. The stakes feel much higher when the protagonist has a connection to the crime and a strong personal reason for wanting to solve the problem. Usually this means they're related to the victim in some way. They were classmates, coworkers, neighbors, siblings, parents, relatives, friends, lovers, exes. Sometimes the protagonist is one of the suspects in the crime, so their motive is to clear their own name. The main character's profession might also motivate them, especially if they're a law enforcement officer or a journalist. Those character archetypes are stereotypically nosy, and so their involvement makes sense. This can be a balancing act because if they know too much, it's boring, but if they know too little, they're not going to be invested in finding answers, and neither will the reader. This is part of the reason that outsiders moving to a new town or moving back home is so appealing to writers. The character has to learn a lot more about the townspeople and the local drama than someone who's lived there their entire life. Take Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. The protagonist, Camille, is a reporter who returns to her small hometown to write about an unsolved murder. She's not only motivated by her job as a reporter, but her complicated relationship with her family also drives her to find out what's really going on. My favorite types of thrillers are where the protagonist loses themselves a little. It's like tugging at the reader's heart and stomach. Messy, flawed characters inevitably put themselves in danger while pursuing answers. They screw up, they alienate their allies, they trust the wrong person. Boring people don't drive good thrillers, and you can't be afraid to do terrible things to your characters. We see this in The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins, where the main character suffers from alcoholism. That gets her into dangerous situations and makes her an unreliable witness. Your protagonist needs a certain level of pathos, a darkness, a drive, something that makes them a little messed up. Either they are that way at the beginning and that is what draws them to the mystery, or they are somewhat ruined or tainted by the end. There has to be something ticking under the surface, something sharp-edged about the protagonist that makes you feel slightly uncomfortable. People who have secrets or agendas or hang-ups make for the most interesting protagonists. My main character, Cecilia, in Pretty Dead Queens, watched her mom die, and it messed her up. Her grief turned her into this morbid, jaded person who was fascinated but also repulsed by death. That's how I gave her a sharp edge. She's a decent person, but her obsession with solving a murder isn't healthy. There's also an alternate universe where the Ivies could have been written from a much nicer, normative main character, but I don't think I'm capable of writing normal people. I like a bit of intensity. It would still work, but it wouldn't be as interesting. The book is about toxic friendships and how those friendships change you for better or for worse. If the main character Olivia had been a good, normal person, it would have become a morality lesson of, oh, here's this poor, nice girl being hoodwinked by these mean people. At a certain level, it's not realistic. You don't hang with mean girls unless you have darker qualities in you too, and that is what is interesting to explore in a juicy thriller. You can't go wrong with giving your main character a secret, a vice, or a chip on their shoulder.
Complex protagonists are one thing, but what about the victims, the people whose deaths or disappearances spark the plot? Tip number 4 is all about making your victim complicated. They can be downright terrible people, blackmailers, spouse beaters, and puppy kickers. Or they can be fundamentally good people with secrets that paint a target on their backs, or compel them to do radical things. If your victim isn't complicated, you might not have enough red herrings, since you need multiple characters who have different motives for wanting to hurt that person. In Karen McManus's YA thriller, One of Us is Lying, the victim Simon is widely disliked because he runs a school gossip blog and he has dirt on everyone, including the 4 students who were with him in detention when he died. Simon played dirty when it came to digging up other people's secrets, making himself a lot of enemies. He wasn't above bullying or lying. Because all of the point of view characters have secrets that Simon could have outed on his blog, they all have different motives as murder suspects. Making the victim less sympathetic doesn't mean condoning murder as a punishment for bad behavior, It just means that the situation is often more morally gray than it appears on the surface. The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides is a great example of this. As the reader learns more about the victim's selfishness and misdeeds, the more they understand the killer's motivations. Thrillers are, in part, about making readers feel uncomfortable, and blurring the line between good and evil is one way to accomplish that. Victims who are children aren't normally complicated figures, instead they reveal the complicated nature of the adults around them. The murder of a young girl brings out the worst in the three protagonists of Dennis Lehane's Mystic River, where paranoia and suspicion drive them to darker places. You can add further intrigue to a thriller by giving your victims mysterious past or secrets that are uncovered over the course of the novel. The word motives has come up a few times now, but we haven't touched on how to brainstorm motives for a crime, whether it's a murder or otherwise. For tip 5, let's talk about how motives and themes can spring from the setting. There are numerous broad categories for motives: revenge, jealousy, money, sex, love, self-preservation, accidents. When you choose your setting, you create a web of potential characters and motives. If you set the story in a coastal town, suddenly you're populating a list of options for the victim, mode of death, suspects, conflicts, and themes. The victim might have been a lifeguard who drowned in the ocean. A suspect could be a tourist visiting for the summer. A lighthouse could serve as the setting for the climactic scene. Limitations breed creativity. This type of thematic cohesion is something I really admired about the Ivies, which is set at an elite boarding school where there's cutthroat competition to get into an Ivy League university. The boarding school is a closed environment, where teens have more freedom than if they were living with their parents, and the dorm rooms are an important scene-level setting. From this setting arises specific social conflicts. The protagonist is a scholarship student, whereas her friends are all from wealthy families. These social conflicts then feed into the novel's themes. The Ivies is a commentary on how wealth plays a role in college admissions. The story also captures the very real pressures that many students face as they compete for a spot at a prestigious university, because it feels like that will determine the rest of their lives. That dynamic wouldn't be as pronounced in a public school or homeschool setting. A competitive school in a rich suburb creates that academic pressure cooker environment that amps up the social tensions that lead to the crime and contribute to the killer's motives. Once you have a setting in mind, create a list of social dynamics that might occur there. You could explore the sticky social politics and histories in small towns. In institutional settings like hospitals, what are the different social hierarchies involved? Even at the level of neighborhoods or schools, you have homeowner associations and school boards that could create drama. Consider microcosms with lots of interpersonal complications and conflicts.
You're probably drowning in information, so here's one more thing to remember. Good thrillers are made in editing. You'll never nail it on the first draft. As you edit, you'll add complexity, deepening the layers. You'll weave in foreshadowing and red herrings. You might even make the twist or reveal less obvious in editing and remove some foreshadowing. Give your manuscript to beta readers and ask them to keep track of what their predictions were at different points of the novel. If they guess the twist too early, you might have to add in more suspects or potential motives as red herrings. If the reader waffles on their guess about the culprit, that's okay. That uncertainty works in your favor, as readers will keep reading on to see which of their predictions were right. As you go through your novel scene by scene, pinpoint the ones that don't have enough tension or that feel repetitive or slow. Recast those scenes by imagining how you could make them more interesting. An early draft of The Ivies had a scene where the main friend group meets in a dorm room. But my editor felt the scene dragged down the pacing because I already had a dorm room meeting scene earlier. So I recast the scene in the school bathroom after a memorial service. The cop investigating the murder walks in on the protagonist talking with her toxic friends about their alibis. That simple fix of changing the scene setting added more social stakes and tightened the pacing. Another great trick is to make the character take an active role rather than a passive one when it comes to investigating. If you have a character easily obtaining information, make it harder. In my upcoming novel, Pretty Dead Queens, I originally had the protagonist take a picture of a board at the police station as a way for her to find an important clue. A photo of the dead girl's backup homecoming dress that was slashed with scissors. Then she sat down and talked with her friends in her friend's bedroom about suspects and timelines. My editor thought it was boring and suggested that instead of just looking at pictures, the girls should find the dress themselves. That added so much more conflict, especially because the main character isn't supposed to be meddling in this murder investigation, but now they have to call the police about this piece of evidence they've found. Don't let characters get stuck in their own heads too much. They need to go places, see things, do things, and involve other characters. Adding a ticking clock is another easy way to put pressure on your protagonist. Maybe the character only has a limited amount of time to gather information, and they could be caught doing something they shouldn't be doing. Snooping around in someone's office or on their computer is a common trope in thrillers. Always look at your pinch points. Any point where your character is butting against a significant obstacle. Look at those scenes to make sure you're maximizing your tension. Think about how the reader and character emotionally come into and out of the scene to tighten and increase tension. As with all writing, it helps to read voraciously, especially the types of books you want to write. Reading recently published thrillers will also give you comparative titles that you can use to entice literary agents or readers. Plus, reading thrillers primes your brain to think about story beats and pacing. Everyone's process is different. It's why I'm a plantser/headlights writer and I don't outline, because it's all about feeling. Not everyone learns by osmosis, but I do, so to me reading feels like a cheat code. If I read 10 books that are all similar, I can probably write a book in that genre. It trains me to write my own story with a similar tone, mood, and pacing. Just have fun with the process and do whatever works best for you.
Since reading thrillers will help you hone your craft, why not pick up Alexa's young adult thriller novel, The Ivies? I loved the audiobook narrated by Phoebe Stroll. And keep an eye on Alexa's channel for updates on all her future thriller novels and publishing tips. What are your favorite thrillers? Give us some twisty recommendations in the comments. Whatever you do, keep writing.